We're back with the third installment of the Rush Hour Golf podcast. LIV's been on fire the last few weeks. We had LIV Adelaide and LIV Singapore just concluded yesterday.
I really do think LIV is on fire now. There's been these moments that LIV has had that's sort of taken it to another level. I thought last year, the event where DJ made that putt in Boston in the playoff, that was a level up. The team championship at Doral was another level. I think Adelaide took it to a whole nother level just in terms of the amount of people there, the crowd, the golf course. People aren't giving enough credit. That golf course, the Grange, was incredible. And I think that it produced a really great and worthy champion, obviously, in Taylor Gooch, who I've been saying for the last year is a top 20 player in the world. And I think he's starting to validate that a lot more. Even Siwon Kim for a while was, I know that's your block, your account. He was playing pretty well the first couple rounds.
I think he holed on the last day 2 shots from off the green. I don't know if it was he was like out of nowhere. He would be, but one of them was for par.
Yeah, I think.
And I wasn't that excited.
I think he still finished in like 45th place. So it wasn't a great showing by Siwon, but it wasn't last place. But we can focus more on the top of the leaderboard because that's what everybody wants to focus on.
Well, I mean, I think a couple weeks ago I had predicted Sergio to do well. Suddenly, he's doing great.
Sergio is such a great player. Like people forget how good Sergio Garcia is. For me, I found myself rooting for Sergio a lot. Sergio and I are kind of contemporaries a little bit, and I've always rooted for him basically since he's been out on tour. The only times that I haven't really rooted for him was when he was going up against Tiger and Phil, basically.
Maybe 10 years ago, he won the Thailand Open that I went to.
Oh, really? Oh, nice.
Yeah. And I saw him I saw him make a hole in one.
Really? Oh, nice.
He had a young German girlfriend at the time who really was caddying for him. And
I don't remember that, but yeah.
They seem to be in love. I'm gonna say that.
Well, sometimes that can be fleeting, obviously, but and it seems like he's very happy now with his family, so everything worked out pretty well. But he's obviously had success at Sentosa previously. You know, he whenever you have a plaque at any course, that usually bodes pretty well for you and how you're going to do in that tournament. You know, Fireballs as a whole has been playing pretty well most of the season. Eugenio played really well. I think he's sort of trending up now as well. Carlos Ortiz, I think, is in the top 5 of the individual LIV standing. So, you know, I think Sergio definitely felt like he needed to step it up a little bit, and it's always helpful when you go back to a golf course that you've had success at, like he has had at Sentosa, where he's won previously the Singapore Open.
So there's certain guys like Scott Vincent. If you're from that area and you're used to that conditions, you do have a heads up in terms of adjusting properly for the weather. It's crazy.
That's a good point.
Like sweat salt on your hat hot. Aspirin after the round. Gatorade doesn't help you enough hot. So do you think next year, you know, there's courses for horses?
Yeah. Horses for courses. Yeah. Or you can use it both ways, really. But
you get my point.
Yeah, I do.
So, do you think now almost like some of the courses, depending on the schedule next year, will obviously favor certain guys? If they have a few more in Asia, then Scott Vincent's a bigger star. If they keep it in the States, maybe you're less of a star.
No, it's definitely something to that. Like, that was also part of the reason why the tournament last year, Miami, I favored a lot of the guys that had played Doral well in the past, like DJ and Patrick Reed. And I think things like that really do bear out over the course of time. And I know LIV signed a long-term contract with Sentosa. I think it's like 6 years. So they're going to be going back there every year, just like they're going to be going back to the Grange. And I do think there is a little bit of consistency year to year that you're going to start seeing with certain players performing really well at certain tournaments, certain courses. So I think this is just because LIV is so new. There really isn't a lot of sort of history that a lot of these guys have at some of these courses. But at the same time, I think that some of these courses do appear on sort of the world global stage every now and then, like Sentosa with the Singapore Open. And it was pretty clear to me that it was going to favor certain players, guys that were really, really good, sort of mid-iron players. Even Phil said it in his presser right before the event. You really need to be dialed in from 160 to like 210 yards. And I mean, that's like perfect Sergio Garcia territory. That's perfect Taylor Gooch territory. It's perfect like Joaquin Neiman territory. Did pretty well. And I don't know Scott Vincent all that well, but it seems to sort of feed into his game too.
His follow through on his iron shots reminds me of my follow through when I'm trying to steer the ball around the golf course. When you're just trying to keep it in play. But he's awesome.
Him and Mito Pereira kind of have similar. Like Mito's always kind of steering it a little bit. Sometimes it doesn't go well for him. But
did you notice how short Mito's shorts are? Well, I mean, they're basically like halfway up his leg. I noticed that because it's everyone else is wearing normal shorts. Bermuda. Maybe you showed them me. He's halfway up his leg. I don't know if anyone is noticing this thing.
I haven't noticed that. I'll be honest. There are, I definitely have noticed that there's certain players that definitely gravitate towards that sort of more modern, what they call a tailored fit, and sort of short shorts. I know Cameron Tringale is kind of like that too. I know a few players that are 100% not into that. Phil being one of them. I don't think that's his style at all. I think he's either number one or top 5 in career PGA Tour earnings without actually winning a tournament. So he's actually, I think he's going to do a lot of the same at LIV. He's already had a bunch of pretty high finishes already, top 10s, top 15s. Played pretty well. He was in the mix at Singapore for a while. But yeah, high flyers, they were really like in the mix for the first time to like potentially win, and they kind of faded on Sunday, but they'll be back. A lot of those guys are playing really well right now.
Had you told me at the beginning of the season, with the likelihood of the Range Goats winning an event, I would have given you good money that they would not have won an event this year.
Really? Oh, interesting.
I did not see the Range Goats. I figured it was always going to be, like I said in another episode, aces, fireballs, crushers. Yeah. I thought that the Rangers were definitely a team to watch. I thought that it all sort of came down to the sort of health and their captain Bubba Watson finding form, because he had basically been completely out for almost a full year. So you never really know how people are going to respond to coming back from an injury. It seems like he's finding his form. Taylor Gooch has been probably one of the most consistent players at LIV. I mean, he's really turning into a dominant player, like just with the last 2 tournaments that he's had, winning both events. I think he's 36 under par. He's holding off in on form Brooks Koepka. Brooks Koepka seems to be completely back. But,
for sure.
Knee healed up.
No question.
Just, win, tee for second.
Yes.
He's on fire now. How high do you rate Taylor Gooch at this point? Is he, would you say top 8? Like that?
I don't know.
Top 20 easy. But at this point, I mean, the major's coming up. We also got to talk about Taylor not being in the U.S. Open.
Oh, yeah. So first things first, we'll talk about the PGA. Taylor's definitely going to be there. Me personally, I think Taylor Gooch needs to be one of the favorites going into Oak Hill at the PGA in a few weeks. I don't think there's any question about it. He's playing really well, probably the best he's ever played in his career.
Him versus Cantlay, who do you think is the better guy right now?
That's a great question.
There you go. You're already in the top 5, top 6.
Yeah. Well, I don't have Patrick Cantlay rated quite that high. I think in my new rankings, I kind of had him outside the top 10. And I think he's had some pretty good major performances. Like he's competed in the Masters previously. I think he's finished top 10. As much as I like Taylor Gooch, I think his best major finishes are like top 15 at the Masters. He finished top 20 at the PGA, pretty good. It's part of the reason why I haven't rated Max Homa as high as a lot of other people have.
He's always not a top 10 guy.
No.
He's good at his certain tournaments, but as soon as you get in the majors, starts fading away.
Yeah, he's kind of speaking of horses for courses, he plays really well on the West Coast for a lot of reasons. Obviously, he's a California guy, as am I, so I totally get, responding and playing well on certain types of grass. So I think that it's going to be really interesting to see how a lot of these guys do at LACC and the U.S. Open, and I'm really hoping that Taylor Gooch finds a way to get into the U.S. Open. I've already offered him my qualifying spot. If he's desperate to get into the field, I will relinquish it to him. But we'll have to see how that goes. But hopefully they have some sort of special category for him, because he really is probably top 15 in the world.
Isn't it insane that the U.S. Open has some kind of other criteria they added about having to also be qualified or exempt? And so they made a 2-prong category, adding another prong, and then therefore the only person affected was Taylor Gooch, who's now on fire and just wins the last 2 tournaments.
Yeah, the U.S. Open's always had special exemptions for certain players that are deserving. Usually they reserve it for players that have won U.S. Opens in the past or have won majors in the past. I think given where we are in the golf world, how the official world golf rankings are just totally obsolete. Look, Taylor Gooch has won the last 2 live events and has looked like a top 5 to 10 player in the world, even though I'm not willing to rate him quite that high. I think that you have to recognize, hey, this guy 100% deserves to be in the U.S. Open field. He shouldn't have to go through qualifying or anything like that. He's easily in the top 50, 60 in the world. That shouldn't even be a debate.
I think he's top 10. Look, who would you pick now going into the next major? Would you think even Cameron Smith or Taylor Gooch? Cameron Smith, he's kind of bringing his C game out lately.
Yeah,
and Taylor Gooch, back-to-back weeks, all the stress, just holding the lead, always up and and then that clutch, maybe a little bit lucky drive in the playoff hole.
He admitted he pulled that drive a little bit. But yeah. Oh, it was 2 yards away from going in the water, and he admitted he pulled it a little bit, but still he pulled it off, and nobody's going to remember that. They're only going to remember that he's won the last 2 live events, and he's 3,600. Fair.
But his second shots on that same hole, the par 5. It's too easy for him from 240, 250 out. He still just pops it on the green each time.
Yeah. No, he was really, really impressive. I thought that he definitely had an advantage in the playoff over Sergio, who was, hitting 3-wood off of the tee. I feel like you kind of have to play a little bit more aggressively, and that's exactly what happened with Taylor Gooch. He played a little bit more aggressively, and he was the one that won. So I don't think that's a coincidence. Sometimes you have to play a little bit more risky to get the reward, and Taylor Gooch got it. So
Taylor Gooch's putting seems to be perfect pace every time.
I mean, every part of his game is clicking right now. You don't shoot back-to-back 62s and sort of have a 10-shot lead on the field without everything clicking. He's admitted his putting is great, short game is good, even though he hasn't really missed that many greens, so he hasn't really been able to test his short game all that much. His long game is great, his driving is good, his mid-irons are good. He's been very consistent the past month, and everything has been A+. I don't know how long he's going to be able to maintain that. That's always kind of the hard part, is when you get on a heater like that, how do you even maintain it?
He's taken the same top game from Australia to Singapore, and he's continuing going. Now he goes,
impressive.
To where his home state, right?
Yeah, Tulsa. Yep. He's the only native Oklahoman in the LIV Tulsa field, and this is kind of a homecoming for him. Homecomings can be a little bit difficult, though. It's not like an automatic like home course advantage. I don't think, even though he has played the course a fair amount when he was a youth. But I think it's going to be really interesting to see if he can maintain it through Tulsa and then keep that same level of momentum through the PGA. But going into the PGA, though, I think you have to put Brooks Koepka as one of the top two favorites to win, because he's just been, it doesn't matter what course he's playing on now. Like he's playing really well. Like he's basically playing at the same level that he did when he was winning his four majors 4 or 5 years ago.
I'm wrong about this, but if I do recall correctly, Koepka, if you look at that strokes gained, is like one of the top 2 or 3 guys from 150 yards from the rough. So you know what I mean. So he just digs it out of the rough. It's no brainer. Yeah. He's got those 6-on V-Sol irons. Just cuts right through it.
Yeah, you know, he's not putting a lot of stress on his game now, because like he can hit it in the rough and still he's going to get it on the green if he misses a green. Like his short game's really good. His bunker play is great. His chipping is great. You know, I did see a couple of things at the Masters that like I know he wants to clean up, and it did come out a couple times in Singapore where there were a couple shorter putts that I thought he was definitely gonna make inside of 10 feet, and he maybe missed it a little bit. Like that's what cost him at Augusta. He already knows all this stuff, so it's like not like I'm saying anything that's new. But I think that if he can clean that up and not sort of throw away shots like that, he's gonna be right there at the PGA too.
Last year was definitely the year of DJ on LIV, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then maybe the second guy was Uline. Who's going to be the number one guy this year? Do you think it's going to be Brooks at the end, or do you think it's going to be Taylor Gooch?
It's a great question.
I'm on the spot right now.
No, it's fair.
If you're wrong, I'm going to bring it up later.
When I'm wrong about anything, trust me, you're not the only one that's telling me. Although I'm not wrong all that often, but also don't try to make too many predictions, because it's just really hard to predict this stuff. I will say that I usually will give the advantage to people that have proven that they can be play at a high level for an extended amount of time. So people that have risen to number one in the world, that have won multiple majors, players like Brooks Koepka, who's obviously proven 2017, 2018, 2019, he was the number one player in the world for a long stretch. He was at worst a top 3 player during that stretch. I give him the advantage, sort of being the number one player on LIV. However, we can't ignore Taylor Gooch. He could easily win Tulsa. He can easily win another couple LIV events, and we're talking about him being a 3, 4, 5-time winner in LIV this year, which is crazy. But you know, I still think I've got to give it to Brooks a little bit. You know, some of the other stars are starting to play a little bit better. Cam Smith, you know, he started coming on at the end of Adelaide. He started off pretty well in Singapore. He did admit that last round he was just really fatigued, which I totally understand, being totally emotionally spent after the Australia tournament. I'm hoping that he's sort of trending for the summertime, because I do think that he's going to contend in a major or two this year. I think the U.S. Open kind of has his name written on it to me.
We focused on these guys who are doing well and up and coming, etc.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But what about your boys, the Majestics? We also got to focus on what's going, because individual, we always focus on Siwon Kim. That's becoming a running topic.
Yeah, for sure.
I didn't realize how poorly the Majestics were doing until it was brought up. Like three of the 4 tournaments so far or so, they're dead last.
It's true. I have stuck out my neck for the Majestics. I picked them to finish top 3 in a couple different LIV events. I felt like, you know, they were about to hit their stride a little bit. That hasn't happened yet, so I got to call them out a little bit. Lee Westwood, Ian Poulter, Henrik Stenson, you guys, it's time to pick it up. Like I expect to see you guys. You may not finish on the podium, the next couple events, that's totally fine. I need to see you trending in the right direction. I got to see you guys playing well. Hopefully, you're sort of getting jazzed up for the summertime. A lot of big events coming up for you guys. You're going to be going back to the UK for the London event. You're going to be playing Valderrama, which is another sort of long-time European tour course. So I expect the Majestics. And look, they've also had injuries. I totally get it. Sam Horsfield was dealing with a little bit of a hip injury. Laurie Cantor stepped in and made a hole in one. I'm pretty sure he finishes the low player on the Majestics this past week. However, the rest of the season, I need to see more from them for sure.
I'm giving you an update right now on the PGA Tour. Right now, Rahm is 3 back with, I believe, 3 holes to go on Tony Finau. It's interesting because we have Tony Finau. Yep. He's won a bunch of times last year. He was always the bridesmaid, remember? Last year was back-to-back. Obviously, the fields are getting weaker.
Yeah,
Jon
Rahm,
sure. He's right here. What it was is this would have been his 5th win this year? He's already got 4? He's on
I think
4,
so.
Right?
Yeah, I think so.
Jon Rahm, do his wins get an asterisk by them this year? Because he's doing BJ Singh type work here, just wrapping up wins. But it's not against the full field. It doesn't have all the guys, obviously the stars from LIV.
It does feel a little bit like the PGA Tour those years when like Tiger was out for a full year when he had his Achilles issue, or when he had his knee issue, or when he had his back issue. It definitely seems like these events just don't have the same value that they used to. And I know people on social media get like really upset at me when I say this, but it's like, this is just reality. Like, look, those designated events, yes, they're a little bit better than they were, but they're still not as good as they would have been if you have a handful of events where you're able to include a lot of the top LIV players, because there's no secret that like a lot of those players at LIV, even though they're very happy where they are, they love playing at LIV. There's a handful of PGA Tour events that they would love to play at. They all talk about Riviera
right now. They should have these guys on LIV who want to play at some PGA Tour events when their schedule's open, because it's only 14 weeks a year.
Yeah, exactly.
It fits in the ecosystem, correct?
Oh, right 100%. Now,
the next designated event apparently is not going to have Scotty Scheffler or Jon Rahm. And we don't know about Rory's status either.
It's very interesting, isn't it?
So the whole point of the designated events was to gather all the superstars. Now they're kind of just not showing up.
No.
You get one pass a year, and then apparently you just have to be buddy-buddy with Jay Monahan. They'll just dock you a little bit of pay. But now you got to start thinking, sponsors are like, what do we sign up for? I thought you said we were getting all the top guys, because LIV provides that, right?
Yeah.
Unless there's an injury, they're showing up. It's a very reasonable schedule. But the PGA Tour now, it's like, it seems like it's going in a bad way.
This is the one thing about the designated events, elevated events, whatever you want to call it. I always had a little bit of a raised eyebrow when I heard all these people getting so excited, like, we're guaranteed to get all these players and all these events. And it's like, were you really guaranteed to get all these players? Obviously, we're already seeing Rory McIlroy has already skipped 2 of these events when you're only supposed to miss one, and he's basically been docked $3 million from his pit money. There's a lot of questions being raised now. There's a lot of things going on behind the scenes. I don't know how this is going to play out. I've heard rumors that there's kind of a bit of a mutiny going on, where a lot of the players are rebelling against the sort of PGA Tour leadership and the sort of the power structures behind the scenes, is sort of driving all these changes.
It's weird to me that the top tier guys seem to be a little mutiny on the bounty.
Yeah.
I understand the second tier guys being completely resentful because you have a membership that's supposed to look out for all their interests, but they're looking out for one group's more, the first tier guys, and now the first tier guys are like, I'm not going to even show up.
Yeah, and you got to remember, all these guys talk like Yes, it's sort of the first tier players that are driving all the changes. But I know for a fact that the rank and file players, the majority of them are not happy about what's going on. And you have to believe that every single event that these players play at, they're all sort of members at the same clubs and sort of the same cities throughout the country, whether it's South Florida, the sort of Phoenix area, or in Texas. They're all talking about this stuff, and they are letting everybody know that the rank and file players are not happy about how things are going. And yeah, they have these talking points that are supposed to get everybody to sort of buy in. But it's like that's not really working. So I think it's going to be a really interesting. I think that the 2023 PGA Tour season is going to be really interesting to see how things play out.
I think we're just knowing how human dynamics work and jealousy and resentment building up. I honestly think you're seeing the PGA Tour imploding right now. I'm calling it right now because, you go into any company and you start treating some people differently than the others. Now the people are being treated as they feel less, they want to bail. The other guys feel more entitled. You increase the gap. But it's interesting because the more entitled first-tier PGA Tour pros, shouldn't they be answering the same questions the LIV guys had to ask of how much money do you need? Remember that? It was always like, it's not about the money. But these guys are already been well paid. You guys have hundreds of millions, and you still have to get the first cut of the pie.
Yes. No, I know, like I said, a lot of these guys are super, super frustrated. I think that has sort of gotten to some of the top tier guys, which is part of the reason why you've been seeing the last couple months the top tier guys on the PGA Tour have not been playing well. I don't think that's a coincidence. Yes, John Rahm has been playing lights out. I don't think I think guys like him and Scotty Scheffler have already sort of rationalized sort of all the things going on the tour, and those guys have always been supportive of LIV. You can't really say that you've heard either of them talk negatively about LIV like Rory has or some of the other guys have. And I do think that a lot of that is taking a toll on these guys. Golf is such a mental game where you're going to play your best when everything is in alignment. Right now, there's a lot of things on the PGA Tour that are not in alignment. They're just not. And the only ones that are in alignment, guys like Rahm and Scotty Scheffler, are the ones that are dominating. I don't think there's any coincidence in that.
The players that played it the smoothest, I think, were the ones that always stuck to the lines. I want to play where the best players play.
Yeah.
That was perfectly ambiguous because, in a year or two, if all the best guys are on LIV, you're doing it for the competition, right?
Players like DJ and Bryson, they were that was exactly how they hedged their bets in that time period where there was a little bit of uncertainty about what was going on. They were like, look, as long as all the best players are playing on the PGA Tour, that's where we're going to be. That obviously changed, and then everybody flipped.
Can you imagine, in the future, 2 years down the line, the guys who've, I don't know, I wouldn't say necessarily burn their bridge with LIV, but, McIlroy's gone out of his way to be petty against Greg Norman. Can you imagine a time where it's obvious the best players are on LIV, and now Rory's beaten up on a John Deere 3M Open, and no one cares? Because you know what I mean? There's you devalue the win as well.
Yeah.
So you don't care if you're basically a glorified Corn Ferry Tour champ every week.
No, and that's the thing that a lot of the PGA Tour sycophants that I talk to on social media, they don't even want to recognize that a lot of these wins that are going on the PGA Tour have been devalued. And part of the reason why it doesn't look like they are is because, a lot of these events are actually getting more OWGR points that they've gotten in the past, which doesn't make any sense. How you can have all these great players leave the tour, go play someplace else, and now you have these events that are getting more points than they were getting before. It's so counterintuitive to anybody who's sort of logically thinking through this stuff. And you have to realize that all this stuff is coordinated. The PGA Tour has been trying to sort of solidify their monopoly on the top level of golf for many, many years. And they're not going to let go of that monopoly easily. Like everybody at LIV totally understands that. Fans should understand it too. Like this is going to be a sort of longer, drawn out process than like any of us want. However, I think the sooner that a lot of the top players get on board that like, hey, we have all the power in this particular instance. Like without us, the PJ Tour is absolutely nothing. Basically, like they could basically do whatever they want, which is what they've been doing ever since they met in Delaware, and even prior to that, meeting in Ireland at the Pro-Am, the JP McManus Pro-Am. Like they've been talking about sort of this takeover of the top players for a while, and I think that a lot of the frustration from the sort of tier 2 players, the sort of rank and file players, is that you've made all these changes, all these drastic changes to the tour, and it's like, shouldn't you have at least like tried to talk to LIV first before you like make all these drastic changes? Where, look, there's a good chance you talk to LIV, you figure out there's no resolution. It's gotta go on the way it is. Like it is what it is. That's certainly a possibility. However, if you at least talk to LIV and like decide on some sort of agreement in terms of player movement, in terms of this and that, you don't have to worry about, all of a sudden you don't have to worry about like funneling all this money to the top players anymore, because you've already figured out like exactly how this whole ecosystem is going to work, in terms of maybe there's a limited amount of players from the PJ Tour every year that can go to LIV. Like that's certainly something that LIV, I know for a fact, would be happy to talk to with the PJ Tour, but the PJ Tour has totally refused to talk to LIV the last 18 months.
What I find interesting about this whole mutiny situation and, the discontent is, as you just pointed out, these top players are the ones who are actually calling the shots and have the power. So it's an illusion by the PGA Tour that they're putting out these rules that these top guys must follow. And now these guys can just thumb their nose at the rules. And now we can see how it plays out, right? Because you're saying you just set these rules for these guys, and now these guys are saying, you know what, I'm not gonna do this. I'm not showing up. And if they can't enforce the rules, then you have no power, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's a complete smoke and mirror situation.
Yes. I think this whole thing is going to wind up, people ask me what my prediction is, and a lot of people talk about Jay Monahan like he's the main problem in this, and he isn't. He's a front man. He's not the one calling the shots here. He just isn't. If you asked anybody in the pro golf world, everybody knows that. So I do think at some point he's going to be scapegoated. I don't think there's any question in my mind. And I think that the players, you're already seeing evidence that like Rory's obviously he missed the last event. There's no guarantee he's going to show up at Wells Fargo. I think that he probably will, except if he doesn't, that should be a red flag to everybody that like, wait a minute, there's way more going on behind the scenes here than like anybody would guess.
Paradise.
Trouble in paradise for sure.
They're going to have the next Netflix series is going to be the dysfunctional PGA Tour show. And you can just see the poor dynamics between the players and management.
It's going to make for a great show, though. I mean, it could be the highest rated show on Netflix at this point. So we'll have to see how it plays.
Real Housewives of PGA Tour.
Exactly. The best reality show out there. Yeah,
it's an entertainment product now, so you got to do what the people want.
It's impossible to really predict exactly how this is going to play out. I do think eventually, sometime in the next year, Jay Monahan's going to be forced to resign. I don't know when that's going to be. And I do think that the whole structure of the PJ Tour, in terms of their board of directors, in terms of all of their sort of how the power structure works there, is going to be totally blown up. And I think it's going to be a really interesting thing seeing how that whole dynamic plays out.
I've done a Big Boy Pants Golf video on the board of directors. Mary Meeker, she was kind of criticized for the whole internet bust back in the day. Magically appears, on the board of directors. Let's just say it's maybe shady.
Go to the PGA Tour website. Look at the board of directors, the board of directors that are all non-golfers. Like everybody from
the crypt. Tales from the crypt level.
Let's just say those are not the people that I want to be figuring out the business of pro golf going forward. If we're trying to go younger and we're trying to get bigger, no way.
Definitely, they're definitely not growing the game. And let's hit the last topic for today. We've had 2 international events for LIV.
Mm-hmm.
Is it growing the game? And should there be more international events? Because I'm getting pumped up for the overseas events more than the stateside ones.
Me too. I definitely think that's where things are trending. We've already heard that there's likely next year going to be 2, at a minimum, 2 Australia events, and there might be a whole sort of Asia Pacific swing at the beginning of next year. I think that we're going to have 14 events. If you were to ask me to guess, I'm thinking it's probably going to be 9 international events and 5 events in the U.S. That seems like the right number.
Wait, you said 9? You said 9 international, 5 U.S.?
Yes.
You think they're going to flip it the other way?
Yes. I think so. I just think that's where things are trending. Like, you have to go to the markets where there's a demand for high level golf.
They're starved for attention.
There's no place that's more starved for high level golf than Australia. And
Sydney and Perth. You can go both coasts.
Sydney, Perth, Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide. Like there's so many great places. And I've talked to a lot of Australians at this point. Probably more I've had more conversations with Australians in the past year than I've had my whole life prior to LIV coming on the scene. And I think that there's this. They've been starved for high level golf for a really long time, and I do think that LIV is going to at least do 2 events. They could easily do 3 events next year if they really wanted to. And I've heard that there's a couple of venues that seem to be they might be off limits, but I don't think they are. If LIV came to them with the right proposal, places that are very well known in Australia, I think you can easily see a situation where LIV sort of steals these venues that may have held President's Cups in the past, or maybe forces the PGA Tour, you're going to have to share one of these venues with LIV, which has been something that they haven't wanted to do. Obviously, taking the Mayakoba event once LIV was in at Mayakoba, moving it to a whole nother course designed by Tiger. So,
isn't this tournament now being held at a Greg Norman designed?
Yes, it is. Right? Yes, it is. Yeah, the Mexico Open
Norman course. So
they need to understand, as much as certain people may not like Greg Norman has so many great courses throughout the world. He's so influential in the golf community. I think that it makes a lot more sense. Like you've heard a lot of guys on the PGA Tour and the leadership saying, "Oh, Greg Norman's got to go," and it's like, first of all, why? Like, Greg Norman has been one of the biggest reasons why LIV has been a success in the first year. That much is obvious. So if there's some personal issues that you have with him that date back how many decades to when he wanted to do the world tour 30 years ago, you got to get over it. It's time to build a bridge and get over it, guys. So, like, if we all want what's best for golf long term, I've been very consistent about this from the beginning. I'm not going to change my stance on this. This all goes back to the PGA Tour and their power structure, them talking to LIV Golf to figure out what's going to be the best thing for the pro golf ecosystem going forward. And if you talk to them, it's obviously going to be LIV focuses more on international markets because the PGA Tour is never going to do that. Although I'm hearing rumors that, like, the strategic alliance, there may be more events in Europe that sort of
like
become co-sanctioned
with the BMW, maybe.
Yeah, like a co-sanctioned event. Yeah, and that's great.
Already the top PGA guys go over to the BMW to get more points.
A lot of them do,
right? So it just it changes the appearance a little bit, but in substance, it's the same thing, right? If you went over there before, you're going to go over there again. You change the wording around. Who cares?
No, it's true. It's true. And I do think that you can make these events a lot bigger than they would be, and it's just by talking to Liv and getting them into the fold and figuring out what's going to be the end game, what's going to be the solution that makes everybody happy. And maybe nobody's happy with the resolution except for the fans. Like, that would be amazing, having like the BMW PGA at Wentworth with like all of these stars from the PGA Tour, from LIV, from the European Tour. Like, all of a sudden that becomes like a major in my mind. Like, that course is great. I love Wentworth. I've been watching Wentworth for 25 years. Like, I really I know that course almost as well as I know like Augusta and these other courses that we go back to every year. So there's obviously like some resolution that you can figure out going forward where LIV becomes kind of the international tour, and then you also come to US markets that are not being served by the PGA Tour. Like, the PGA Tour doesn't go to the New York market, which is the biggest market in the country, which makes no sense to me. They don't go to Chicago. They don't go to the Northwest. They don't come to San Francisco all that often. Like, there's 5 places very easily that you could figure out in the U.S. that need to have LIV events that are not going to have PGA Tour events.
At this point, and I don't know if you feel the same way, but the PGA Tour should realize that they're in the weaker position, and they, for their own survival, need to figure something out, because you lose 4 or 5 more big names. It really is just John Deere Classic every week, and then maybe 1 or 2. It's basically, it'll be the Mexico Open.
Yeah, they are going to lose more players next year. There's no question about it. I've already heard certain folks talking to their equipment manufacturers telling them, hey, next year my plan is to play at LIV Golf. So, and they may not be like the top 10 to 15 players on the PGA Tour. So maybe the PGA Tour thinks that they're fine losing some of those like mid-tour stars that are like major winners, or like guys that have been ranked in the top 5 to 10 previously. Maybe they feel like they're totally fine losing those guys, but eventually attrition is going to take over.
The problem is their stars have very little charisma.
Oh my God,
Patrick Cantlay's star, he's not exactly brimmed with personality. And now the people have turned on him for the slow play. Remember when he was the hero against Bryson? Well, Bryson goes to LIV, and now instead of Patty Ice, the population has turned on for slow play. So it just, you never know. People are fickle.
Yeah.
And one minute you're the hero, you're the GOAT, and next thing you're the villain.
The PGA Tour just has to be really careful with sort of, I feel like they're playing with fire at this point. And I think that the PGA Tour players are going to start to sort of exercise their power a little bit more as time goes on. And, to me, I just think that, yes, there's litigation going on, and I get that. And that litigation is actually very, very important to like getting this sort of pro golf ecosystem a little bit more in line, where we have this system of checks and balances in place. That's going on. I totally get it. You can head that off at the pass by just talking to LIV and trying to figure something out. Maybe you can't. Maybe it's impossible. Maybe the litigation needs to go forward. But for me as a golf fan, like, I want to know that every side has done everything in their power to make things better for the fans, for the players, and just give us more of what we want.
I honestly think it's too far gone. Because, as per our prior discussions and my Twitter exchanges, if they've never cared what the fans want, and they're only going to pay lip service now, and they're not really getting the right metrics, even with the PIP, it's just this random, vague. So they've not done anything right for a long time. There's no way you can flip a switch, catch up. You had LIV call your bluff, and now they're taking off. And all the PGA Tour tried to do was a negative image campaign against them. That blew up in their face, or is continuing to blow up in their face.
It's not
now,
working.
The top players who they tried to appease by giving them the power are calling the PGA Tour's bluff. So now you're essentially an event organizer with no power, no respect. I think it's over. I think within a year, we're like, it's game. I'm calling right now.
Game over.
So it's already in like the death spiral. It's a downward.
Right.
People don't realize it, but I've already like seen like there's no way to
Yeah.
pull out of the situation. The plane's going down. The best you can hope for is to jump out and land in a puddle and not break every bone, because that happened to one girl. But it's game over. You're still optimistic though. So let me ask the fans at home: do you think the PGA Tour can pull its way out of this, or is it game over? Get in the comment section below. Let me and Jay know what you think.